Hello, you are listening to the Game Scholar podcast. I am one of the hosts, Rob Farr, and we also have the Game Scholar, Leonard Herman. Do you say hello, Leonard?
Hello, I'm the other host, Leonard Herman, the Game Scholar.
Yeah, but it's actually your namesake. So it would be good for you to speak because you're what people are actually tuning in for. And they're not actually tuning in, but we say antiquated shit like that from time to time.
Or you do. I speak in the current vernacular.
Oh, I didn't realize that. So you should speak a little bit louder in the current vernacular as well.
I gotcha.
Okay. So this is episode 2 of the Game Scholar podcast. Our initial episode was fairly well received by the handful of people who actually listened to it, which was nice. The only bad feedback I got from it was something about me. So that's nice.
Well, that you expect. So.
Well, yes, I am garbage. So you'd expect people to call me out on that. But today's episode, we are going to be dipping our toe.
We're going to be talking about other garbage.
Well, alleged garbage in some respects. But we are going to be talking about the famous game Tetris, and we are going to be talking about
the infamous
crooked bit. What you keep stepping over this? What are you saying now, Game Scholar?
Or you said famous, so now I'm going to say infamous.
Ooh, yes, wow.
The person we're going to be talking about.
Well, not just that person, but there's some. So basically, we're babbling now, but basically there's a connection to Tetris to some very unsavory people who have had many interesting bad business dealings. Maybe not interesting, but at least bad business dealings, and someone who molested the teenage girls, and then someone who allegedly did that as well. So that is today's episode, and you want to get into it, Game Scholar? What do you want me to sort of give the origin of how we wrote this thing up and stuff like that? Want me to just do that?
Are you going to mention who we're talking about, or do you want me to do
that? Yes. Well, that's how it sort of rolls out in the origin. Well, I'll just do it. So
okay.
This is really good podcast.
I'll get her name wrong anyway.
Yes. So, in early July, Ghislaine Maxwell. It's really pronounced Ghislaine, but who gives a shit? Ghislaine. Sorry, this is America. You're Ghislaine. Ghislaine Maxwell, who was an associate of convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein.
Dead convicted.
What's that?
Dead convicted sex offender.
Well, it's not dead convicted. He's convicted and dead.
Yeah. Okay.
But he's a kid toucher, Jeffrey Epstein, and his bottom bitch, his right hand woman, was arrested. There is a documentary miniseries on Netflix that covers Jeffrey Epstein's story, a lot of the big stuff, all the way up until his suicide, possible murder in 2019. I was telling the Game Scholar about this, and he was the only one who picked up on this. I said, I was watching this thing, and they're talking about Ghislaine Maxwell on this and stuff, and did you hear about she was arrested?
And I said to you, Ghislaine Maxwell is the daughter of Robert Maxwell, who was part of the infamous Tetris story.
Yes, and that's how we, I helped on the piece that's on the GameScholar.com. I don't even know what it's called at this point.
It's called the Epstein-Nintendo connection.
The Epstein-Nintendo connection. Ooh, like the French connection, but not. Do you know, by the way, that they keep calling Jeffrey Epstein a pedophile, and that's actually wrong? Did you know this?
Well, what's a pedophile?
A pedophile.
I mean, I know what a pedophile is, but what's the definition of a pedophile?
Well, well, then you don't know what a pedophile is. a pedophile, like really young
He's
children.
young. That's what I thought. And he
And
he only went to 14 years old. So
well, he went. I think it was like 13 to like 17 or something like that. Whatever it
and
was, he like
that's not a that's not a pedophile.
no. If you're primarily into teenagers, but I guess teenage girls in this instance, it's something like a phebophile or something.
I
It's
never
someone
even
who's
heard that word
primarily.
before.
I might be mispronouncing it, but there is a thing you can look it up, and it's something like, if you're attracted to girls who are in their teens, basically, and that's what Epstein is. So that
Now our audience is not only learning game history, they're learning new vocabulary words.
yeah, now they anybody who is into teens, they don't have to think that they're pedophiles anymore. They're just the phebophiles. So good for you. Next time, stand up and say, "I'm not a pedophile. I'm an ephebophile." So anyway, so this led to a piece. It's a pretty short piece, and basically it's the highlight there, or it's some of like the most important parts of this whole Tetris saga. And so why don't you tell people what the Tetris saga was without telling it? What did you write? 27 pages about it in
Yeah,
Phoenix.
yeah.
And
There's a chapter devoted to Tetris, Appendix 1, and you're right. It's very long and detailed. And but this part, and of course, Ghislaine wasn't mentioned in Phoenix at all.
well,
But
she wouldn't have to be.
oh, well, anyway, as I said, she's the daughter of Robert Maxwell. Robert Maxwell was this very famous rich guy in England. He
It was a publisher.
Well, he's a multi-publisher. He owned many things, including he's the New York Daily News. But as far as us video gamers are concerned, he owns some digital publishing companies, such as Microsoft in England and Spectrum Holobyte in the United States.
Wait, did you just say digital publishing companies?
Yeah, I don't know what you call them.
What like? Why would they be digital?
Well, because it's software. It's digital.
No, but
I didn't want to
again,
just say a publishing company. I want to distinguish it from a print publishing company.
No, but we just say publishers, though. I'm just saying
But
that
I wanted to distinguish the media companies from the newspaper companies. They're both
no,
publishing companies.
No, I understand that, but I'm just saying if you say today digital publisher, that you're talking about somebody who publishes games digitally. So anyway,
But I'm talking about in 1986 or so. I don't know offhand, but
I
somewhere
know.
in the mid 80s. But anyway,
just,
it doesn't matter. The word came at the top of my head. What do you expect? Anyway, so Robert Maxwell owned these publishing companies that publish software for computers.
There you go. I like that.
There you go. Anyway, he was given the rights to Tetris from some guy named Robert Stein, who owned a company called Andromeda Software. And Microsoft and Spectral Holobyte published Tetris on the PC. And I mean, that's a good story, because when they published on the PC, God, I'm going through my notes because I don't know all this on the top of my head.
Well, I can help you out with Stein.
Hank Rogers, Bulletproof Software, he saw Tetris at the CES. And
yeah, he saw the Spectrum Holobyte version.
Yeah, well, it was at CES, so of course it would be the Spectrum Holobyte version because it's the United States. But anyway, he thought that would be a great game to publish on the NES. And he was good friends with the president of NES because he wrote a version of Go for the NES, and the president of NES, and I'm not going to attempt to try his name.
Arkawa.
Okay, if you say so.
That's his last name anyway.
He was a big fan of Go. So when Hank Rogers presented Go, they became very close friends. Anyway, so Hank Rogers got the rights for the Nintendo version of, well, I shouldn't say the Nintendo version, the Famicom version of Tetris. But the whole problem with this whole thing was that Robert Stein, who assigned the rights to Robert Maxwell, actually it's Kevin Maxwell, Robert's son, he ran the companies. He didn't have the rights to it, and it's a whole long, drawn out affair of who really had the rights to it.
Well, basically, there's one big piece that you missed,
Well, that's
and
the
that
Game Boy.
well, no, not even Game Boy. It's just so Stein saw that saw Tetris in Hungary after a copy was smuggled out of Russia, and the thing is, the Russians owned Tetris at the time because it was created at their Soviet Institute or whatever. So he wasn't just dealing with some, small time developer who created this game. I mean, he was kind of, but he was dealing with the USSR, and so that added an additional wrinkle to it. So this guy was overzealous. He starts selling various rights, and you have Sega buy some of the rights. You have
Then
Atari buy the rights.
Maxwell started, who only had, even if the rights he had were legal, which they weren't, he only had the PC rights to it. But he began assigning rights, the arcade rights, to Atari.
Well, it's not assigning rights. They sub-licensed.
Right, but he didn't have the rights to it, the arcade rights.
So, well, what I was going to say is basically what you got back to before. It was this whole giant mess that occurred after the game started releasing commercially, and it was something that these companies, including Robert Maxwell's companies, Ghislaine's father, they all had to basically sort out with the Soviets.
Right, and Robert Maxwell went right to the top of Russia.
Yes.
I can't remember his name either.
I'm glad you're prepared.
Gorbachev.
Let's see, we do a lot of show prep here.
But when it was explained to Gorbachev that they're going to make more money from Nintendo selling the game, Gorbachev said, "The hell with you, Maxwell," and he sided with Nintendo.
Yeah, because Robert Maxwell, basically, after all this licensing stuff, his companies were interested in some of the stuff. Hank Rogers was interested in at first the Game Boy version, which wasn't announced at the time. Nobody gave a shit about the handheld rights either, for the most part, it seemed. Which is
there were no handheld stuff yet.
No, but there were still handheld rights to Tetris.
There were, but there were no handheld devices, no programmable handheld devices.
No, but that's what I'm saying. That's like,
except for the Epic computer, which came out years. Actually that came out then, but it didn't sell.
No, nothing. There's nothing out there. There's nothing. There was nothing viable out there. But that's the irony of it. All this jockeying for the console rights, for the PC rights, and then we haven't even talked about Tengen yet. But no one seemed to care. They all seemed to shrug at the handheld stuff because, one, they had no idea what Nintendo was bringing out, and two, it just wasn't a thing otherwise. And I don't know if that makes sense going back, but whatever, we're talking. But anyway, no one cared about the handheld rights. And really, when it comes to establishing Tetris as this gaming institution, and the Game Boy and Nintendo as a handheld powerhouse, because that's really where they've always been dominant, has been with handhelds. That no one cared about that license, and it turned out to be, through all this wrangling and everything else, the most important license to get. And and it changed, all this stuff potentially changed the fortunes of different companies and hardware, because who knows what the Game Boy would have become without
with Super Mario Land. That's supposed to be packed with it.
I think Super Mario Land sold really well, and I think it would have sold some systems.
The point Hank Rogers made was that yeah, it would sell well to kids, but the adults who they wanted to get to, Tetris was the game that needed to be packed in.
Well, it's not just boy. I think he made the point. He said, you want to sell it to boys, and this was via some tweets that he made talking about the conversations. A couple, he's tweeting and talking about these conversations. I think that's where it originated from. But yeah, he was saying you can sell this to boys, the Super Mario land, but if you want to sell it to everyone, you get Tetris. I mean, Hank Rogers was just a a true believer in Tetris, and isn't he going to be like the same guy who played Elton John? He is going to
Well,
play Hank Rogers in a Tetris movie.
Well, Taron Edgerton, I think his name is, who played Elton John in Rocket Man, is going to be playing him in Tetris.
Yeah, so it's not like the Tetris movie that's coming out is not like they're going to be some different shapes that are going to be the star of the movie. And it's some, it's a drama about.
Wasn't there one like that already? I thought
there
was.
Where there was a Tetris movie with Tetris shapes.
I thought, because this movie was announced years ago, or maybe I'm thinking of something else.
I don't recall that, but
okay.
I can certainly look up and we can update people on who are clamoring to know on a future podcast. But basically, all this disjointed talk and everything else that we have is basically, when it comes down to it, in my estimation, and it's partially my idea why we did this stuff in the first place. I've always said, it's flimsy. The Epstein Tetris connection is a little flimsy, but it's still related in some way. And Ghislaine and the all the drama that happened to her family in the wake of her father's death. Her father, Robert Maxwell, died. Some people think he was killed, but they don't know for sure. He's, it's ruled, he fell off his boat or something like that, naked, which must have been a sight once they found
I want
his
to point
carcass.
out. I want to point out was what he did with Tetris wasn't illegal. I mean, he didn't do due diligence, but what he did wasn't illegal. But the other thing he did was illegal, which shows that crime runs in the family. And before he died,
well, no, actually, hold on. Before you even say that, Ghislaine Maxwell has not been convicted
she hasn't
of
been
crime.
convicted yet. You're right.
No, so you can't say that runs in the family. That's
okay.
This is just
okay.
She's
but
just been
her father was a criminal because it came to light that that he had been in severe financial straits and had been robbing the pension funds of his employees. And
yes.
after that, his companies, Mirasoft and Spectrum Holobyte, went bankrupt.
Yeah, and who knows? Maybe some of the trauma and embarrassment pushed Ghislaine into that darker lifestyle. You never know, the darker alleged lifestyle.
That's what I said. If she did it, we don't know.
Yeah, but yeah. So with all this, all this license wrangling, Nintendo came out on top. Maxwell's companies crashed and burned eventually a couple of years later after they released those Tetris games, mostly because of his issues elsewhere. I don't know whatever happened to Andromeda Software. It doesn't seem to have done much after this.
I don't know if they were a powerhouse before this.
And then you had Sega, who was a sub-licensee, I think, and they ended up doing their own thing, Columns. And then you had Atari.
Well, didn't they do it?
Tetris.
Isn't there a Genesis version that never was released
of Tetris?
Yes,
that sounds right.
I believe so. There's like 6 copies exist of it or something.
Yeah, some nonsense like that. That sounds correct. But Sega did the Columns thing. And then Atari had been a sub-license, I think, through one of Maxwell's companies, and they created the superior Tengen Tetris.
Yeah, it was a legal sub-license because they didn't have the video game rights. Even if they had the PC rights, they didn't have the video game rights.
Yeah, but I mean, it's all just laziness. But Atari fought Nintendo after Nintendo had secured the rights. So anyway, this whole saga is summed up on the GameScholar.com. Whatever the title was, you can say it again, Lenny.
The Epstein-Nintendo connection.
The Epstein, yeah, and we'll have it linked. But that's just summing up kind of what happened for a lot of the in-depth stuff, because there's so much more detail that we're leaving out here because we're about to sign off, and that we left out deliberately just so that you get you dip a toe in to see some of the crazy things. So one of the best ways of reading more about this, of course, is looking at your Phoenix 4. Looking at your copy of Phoenix 4, and if you don't have it, buy a copy, buy it on Kindle, buy a hard copy, and you can read the saga. But this is something, again, this is just this just is a infamous story that brushes up with an infamous story in video game history. The Epstein thing is incredibly infamous. And then this Tetris thing is one of the most infamous stories, just in terms of all the wrangling and all the dealing with the Soviets and everything else. So it's really interesting and really cool. And Lenny's original 27-page chapter on it is really the best way to learn about it. I think it's really good. But of course I would.
So would I.
Yes. So unless you have anything else to say, we're getting to our time limit.
Well, thanks for listening. And again, check us out at thegamescholar.com.
Yes, GameScholar.com or thegamescholar.com or Facebook.com/thegamescholar. Subscribe to this channel on YouTube and any other place that you're listening to it, and support us. And that's it. Thank you for listening to the Game Scholar podcast.